Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, Debunking Mythology. Sattology means science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. Sattology builds our identity, whereas mythology destroys our identity. And generally, usually a political ploy that this is mythology, that is mythology, this is mythology. And I have proved in my books, and many other authors have proved it, and I'm going to Peru next week to prove the sign on the Candelabra Mountains, which says the Yagya Vedika on the top, mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana as the eastern boundary of Udaygiri Mountains, which is the eastern boundary of the eastern direction. Okay, so I have a very special guest. He's a yogi. He teaches, runs one of the most popular runs most of the popular yoga studio in Pittsburgh, and I think he has branches everywhere now, increasing in Florida, Mexico, and I've seen follow his Instagram, Zeb Yoga. You'll find out. So let us welcome Zeb Homison.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back to your show. It's great to be here.
You're welcome. So Zeb, by the way, for viewers who do not know, he used to teach me asanas in Pittsburgh, and so I learned few basic ones.
Many
So
years ago.
many years ago, but I still practice them. I still practice. So, Zeb, when we talk about yoga, many people they use the difficult words like mystic yoga. There is no mysticism in yoga because I feel yoga is a science, and there's mysticism is something. Also, it's a negative word in a way because some people get turned off by that. And so, what is your view when people say mystic yoga?
Well, there are things that are mentioned in some of the ancient yoga texts that sound like magic, I mean, what else could they be but mystic powers? There are these powers that are referred to as siddhis that, they go through and list. I believe there are eight main ones. You probably know them better than me, but things like levitation and being able to read somebody's mind, or, changing the shape or the size of a person. Um, and, reading that on face value, A, it sounds a little bit like a fable, what you might refer to as mythology. And B, it sounds a little bit like just a magical, mystical thing. Um, so I think in a lot of cases, that's where that stems from. Something that can't be easily explained, that seems a little bit like magic. But I forget whose quote it is, but there's a pretty famous quote that said, any civilization that is far enough advanced, their technology looks like magic. What do you think about that?
No, for a layman, what Elon Musk does with the SpaceX is also mystic rocketry. We don't know what does, like a
Right.
doctor, gastroenterologist. I have so many doctor friends. What they do with the intestines and the gastro, what they can see, perceive, is also mystic for most of us
Right.
because it's magic in their fingers, but they cure. End result is cure.
Not to mention, even 50 years ago, 100 years ago, if you went back and showed them a cell phone and say, this little piece of glass holds basically all the information the human race has ever discovered, they'd laugh at you. They'd be like, that's impossible. And yet, we have these little pieces of glass that have all that information, and somehow we manage to sit and scroll through pictures all day long on them.
And those chips are made of soil, sand, silicon.
Right? Absolutely.
And like, who could have said that this soil or sand, which is available like plenty on a beach in San Diego, you can see. I mean, you can make so many chips from that. That is silicon. I mean, who could have imagined that
Sounds
that
like
can
magic.
store images?
Right.
That's also mystic. The semiconductor industry is a mystic industry, mystic. So
Yep. And there are stories from the Mahabharata and the Puranas, the Srimad Bhagavatam, things like that, that there are things described in them that sound like airplanes and spaceships and nuclear weapons, things that 5,000, 4,000 years ago, whenever these things were stories were created and written down, like how could they possibly know about a weapon that could destroy an entire city? Um, you know, was it just imagination, or was it something that the civilizations back then had knowledge of and was forgotten in the interim between then and now?
you know
And if that's the case, if they had information like that, then who's to say some of these other mystical powers weren't things that they knew how to do? They had access to a different kind of technology, a different kind of knowledge. Um, who knows? I'm not saying that I believe that that's for certain because I can't know that. I wasn't around back then. But I like to stay open to the possibility of, maybe these ancient societies had information, had knowledge that we've lost and we don't know anymore.
I mean, they would think of us as mystic people in today's Kali Yuga, because we are really mystical. We are living in a cardboard box homes, which can like evaporate. At least they lived in stone houses. Now one matchbox can bring down the entire house. I saw with my own eyes in West Virginia. It takes us just 35 minutes to bring the house down because it's all cardboard boxes. One small spark and the whole house is down. And but those houses which they were living in, so that's also a mistake, that how can people live in cardboard boxes now? Like we can drink a perforated plastic bottles. Nobody would have ever thought that, well, plastic is, if anyone knows how the plastic is made, we'll not even touch those bottles. Like what is gone into that making the plastic bottle, and we are putting the most precious thing the body needs in that plastic bottle. And
Right.
it's again mystical for them. I mean, it's a relative term. What is mystic, what is not? I think for an ignorant, the word mystic is mystical itself. But a person who knows things can explain things, right?
Hmm.
Like AI.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
And I mean, you were mentioning earlier, yoga is a science, and some of the mystical powers and some of the more outlandish claims that they make in some of these ancient texts, there's actually sort of a guidelines, a path laid out so that if you're working towards achieving some of these things, it's like, well, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, and then that power will manifest. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, the good segue, actually, a good segue into from going from mystic to a real thing. Now, the there are many things in science. Like, for example, I'm an engineer, and I did not become an engineer after kindergarten. I had to go through the whole education cycle to come to a level where I can understand mathematical physics.
You
Or
didn't just automatically become an engineer,
exactly, nobody does become an engineer like that.
except Doogie Howser.
A good point. So, like
Yeah.
it took a whole lifetime of preparation, maybe the first 10, 15, 20, 20 years, to come to a level where I can grasp those concepts. Same is with yoga. That's why yoga is a science, not a art. Art also and science also. Science and art have very little differentiation. It just depends on the skill. So so like people say, I hear lot of things that controlling somebody else's mind is devilish, infidelish, and all these things. But what about controlling your own mind? Not others, but controlling your own mind. How can that be devilish? When that means
Right.
if you, so what do you think? Like, what can yoga control and what can yoga not control, according to you?
Hmm. That's an interesting question. And, I think it might be useful to sort of like zoom out a little bit. Because control, just the word control, like it conjures all sorts of different ideas and if different feelings. And I think there's a constant battle going on, not just like if we zoom way out, like all over the world, there are people trying to assert their control over other people, over other countries, over the world in general, climate, wildlife, nature. Human beings are trying to just control everything. And there's a little bit of it's always going to be a struggle because even if we gain absolute control in one moment, say one day, we got it. We've got control of everything that we ever wanted. The next day is going to be completely different. Something might come along and, a hurricane might wash through or a wildfire or another country invading. Who knows? Anything could happen. And so moment to moment, there's never complete stability. So this idea of being in control of our circumstances and control of the world around us, it's a little bit egoic, like our mind needs to like hold on to something, hold on to control. But really at the end of the day, that's just going to keep making us more and more insecure. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, yes,
Okay. So, like we zoom out and we look at the world as a whole. There are countries trying to assert themselves. There are, you know, organizations of countries trying to tell other people what to do. There's, people trying to get the climate under control. But, all of that is constantly in flux. So let's take it down a level and or several levels and just zoom into us. Like, what can we control on a personal level? And if you look at somebody like, oh, I don't know, the president of the United States, the most powerful, quote unquote, powerful person in the world, you'd think that they have a lot of control. And yet, they're just as much, at the whim of nature and circumstance as any other one of us, Um, the president of the United States doesn't get to decide what's going on the other side of the planet or what's going on with a hurricane. And so, they might have a little bit more power or influence, but they don't have any more control than you or I when it comes down to it. Um, they've just taken on a little bit more responsibility.
and for viewers, I'll just take a segue. Zeb is taking a teacher's training program in Thailand. Do join him if you are watching the show. And there's a Zeb Yoga. I'll put the link in the video. No, you made a very
Yes.
good point. Mhm. Go ahead.
That's actually going to be in Dominican Republic next
Mm.
summer.
Next summer.
Yeah. 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 Um, yeah, I've got a couple of trips coming up. I think Thailand, I'm taking a group there just to sort of discover more about Ayurveda and yoga. Um, yeah, so anybody's free to join me on any of those trips.
We should make US as a destination, and I hope the visa situation becomes easy because we have very beautiful places in Laguna and South San Diego. I would love to host you here in
We
San
should do
Diego.
that.
These area.
Yep.
These are the
Let's make a
and
plan.
also Baja area. Baja has beautiful places. Uh, and so the so coming back to the our discussion on the control. People are
Yes.
very much scared of control, being controlled, but they're not
Right.
scared of controlling others.
Right. Right.
Both are
Yeah.
equally, both are equally bad.
We want to be in control, but not controlled.
In control.
So, yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit more. I was thinking about this the other day. The Well, in the context of like yogic superpowers, siddhis, mystical powers, whatever you want to call them, that could be a little scary if someone actually had the ability to control your mind or to put thoughts in your head. I could see how people could be worried about that and call it sort of evil or whatever they might think. But at the same time, isn't the big corporations targeted advertising on social media or on television, like, aren't they trying to do the exact same thing? Like, they're trying to put ideas in all of our heads, a little less subtly. It's just like images and advertisements and stuff like that. But, ever since the 50s and 60s, they've gotten really, really good at just like subliminally telling us to do exactly what they want us to do. So, you know, big corporations, even governments, they're really good at sort of like steering us in the direction that they want us to go. How is that any different than mystic mind control? Um, as far as, what we can control, if you want to get really, if you really think about it, we don't have control of much at all. We can control, if we're really disciplined, we can control our thoughts. Uh, we can control our actions. Beyond that, we can also control, to some extent, what we take in, what we eat, what we watch, what we listen to. We can control all of that. Beyond that, and you might have a differing view, and please tell me, but we can't really truly control other people and what they think or what they do. We can't really control the circumstances around us. They're always going to change. The only thing we can be truly sure of in this life is that everything around us is going to change. And that's a little scary. I think most people wanting to try to control people and circumstances around them comes from the fear of change and the fear that, I might lose the things that I've built up in my life. I might have to put myself out on a limb and be a little bit uncomfortable. And that's where the practice of yoga really starts to get interesting. Because as we practice not just yoga asana and pranayama and stuff like that, but those physical practices are, I think, a really good first step. As we get deeper and deeper into any sort of yogic meditation, whether it's movement or breath or sitting still in silence, whatever it is, we start to be able to discipline our mind, our thoughts, our bodies, what we take in on a daily basis. And as we do that, the fear of losing control starts to dissipate. What do you think about that?
So in yoga world, there is a technical word which Patanjali uses, and I'm again reading from my translation, is that pratyayasya parachitta jnanam, which is the exact word. Now, samyam is samyama, we know dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. All three combined when they're done, then some samyam happens. Now, it requires a certain level of yoga perfection,
A
and
really high level. Yeah.
it's a certain level, and then the when you do that, and when you focus on rising above the bodily conception, mind, and intelligence conception, then a yogi attains control over their own mind. Like Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, Evam buddhe param buddhva santabhya atmana. Then he says, rise above the intelligence. And then he gives a hierarchy that the intelligence is above the mind is above the senses are above the hierarchy. And he says the soul is on top of it. Now, there's one thing mentioned here, that the yogi uses these powers only to teach their disciples. So they can remove the impurities from their students' mind, not to, and you correctly said it, because the guna works on yogi also. So if he plays with the guna, then it affects his own practice than others. So he will not advance further. So most of the advanced yogis don't misuse these powers which they attain while doing the practice. But you
Yeah.
correctly also mentioned the
I
corporate world. Yeah, go ahead.
There are stories in the ancient stories, the ancient texts about evil yogis, people that misuse their powers. Like human beings, if you offer them magical, mystical powers, some of them are going to misuse it. Absolutely, sort of the nature of things. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it lays out in the Yoga Sutras, if you've done the work to achieve this level of yoga, this level of union between body and mind and spirit, the majority of people that have gotten to that level aren't going to misuse these powers because they've reached the point of purity in living their life and in their practice where the only reason to use it would be to help others.
You know, like most of the people are still stuck in the Freudian hierarchies, Freudian hierarchies, which are very basic. Very yoga doesn't even start over there, because yoga is much way beyond it. That is for body level, and that too mostly social and emotional constructs. And emotions, we all know that emotions can play either side, can make you strong as well as weak. But the yoga doesn't even start over there. Yoga starts much later than when you are understanding the mind is separate, the intelligence is separate, and half the people won't even say where is the mind. If I ask people where is the mind, and my next question is, so you call yourself mindless? What is the thing? They get offended then. So they can't even say that. And like you ask a question, where is the brain intelligence? Well, people have rods put in the brains, but the intelligence is they're still very intelligent. I mean, they are like super brains they have, even though their brain is not fully formed. They're very intelligent people.
Mm-hmm.
So people can't say where is intelligence in the body, where is, because these are all past karma kind of things, which are the you've done something last. It says in Gita also. So the generally the some of these kind of things like shamanism, they connect with shamanism, which is that shamanism is bad. And there people have used all kinds of cures available by nature. Like in Mexico, pirul tree is considered saintly or sacred. So they burn the pirul tree to remove the insects or bad evil spirits and all those kinds of things they do. But yoga is a science. Yoga has nothing to do with all those kind of things. Yoga is helps you is different. So we cannot correlate a propaganda, mythological propaganda, to yoga, because it's a scientific thing. People have experienced happiness. People have experienced, like, if you can experience something, you don't have to believe in something. We spoke about it last time. So my one of the next points which I want to bring you is that controlling is bad. We all know anything controlling. But what about controlling our own mind and senses? That we preach in the governments. They say, oh, you need to have discipline. This is all controlling. Discipline with the gun, discipline with the car, discipline with your electricity, discipline with your cooking stove. This is
Yeah.
all considered good. But
Yep.
why controlling the mind is bad?
Hmm. One of my teachers always used to say, your mind can be your best friend, your greatest asset, or it can be your worst enemy. Um, and it's all about self-discipline. And sometimes discipline gets it's like looked at as sort of a bad word, like, oh, that I don't discipline is bad. I don't want to do that, or I don't want to be disciplined by someone. But it's if you look at it from a yogic standpoint, really our existence, we're sort of like in these bodies with all these senses, our eyes, our nose, our ears, our mouth, our fingers and our skin to feel things, and our mind is constantly wanting to enjoy, to take in as many of these sense gratification things as possible. um, and our mind, if we're not careful, can get a little bit out of control. And you see it so much in our society these days. um, People just addicted, whether it's like a physical substance abuse addiction, or it could be video games, it could be excuse me for bringing it up, but like things like pornography on the internet, or just like social media, where it's just like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and we get sucked into whatever it is. And it's our senses, we're like trying to enjoy all the time, and it's our mind not being able to take a step back and be like, hey, this isn't healthy. We're not willing to create a separation, a self-discipline. We just want instant gratification all the time. And if we allow ourselves to go too far down that path, it can be really, really unhealthy. So control of the mind, self-discipline, however you want to think about it, becomes really, really important. And I think there's a Paramahansa Yogananda quote where he says, a person that has reformed themselves can go on to reform thousands of others. And that was before the internet and before social media. Um, all it takes is a little bit of work on the self. No, I'm not going to have a alcoholic beverage before 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock today, or no, just little things you can start to do to put your life in order. And over time, if you maintain those as a practice and keep building upon them, you can change your life. You can turn your life around. You can be 20 times more productive in whatever it is that you do. If you watch a documentary about a really successful person, so many times they're like these stories where the person was down in the gutter and they just decided to turn their life around and make this huge change, and they went for it. But it's the discipline of like every single day just getting up, putting your feet on the ground before you start scrolling on your phone, and just getting to work, whatever it is that you're doing. Um, and I make it sound kind of exciting and romantic, and it's sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it's the hardest thing to do, to just get out of bed in the morning. But that's controlling the mind. That's self-discipline.
You know, the see, most of the people don't even understand what is self.
Right. But
So
yeah, where do we start?
because there's so little education in the academic circles. Like I was speaking to one superintendent of one college. I said we need to introduce these basic concepts. If if USA everybody practices yoga, just imagine what can we do. Because if you look at all the scientists or good scientists who have discovered anything in life, they have very regulated lifestyles, and some of them had just pure luck from past life, pure skills they had from past life, from where they got the, like, intelligence is a function of karma, not the physical brain. Everyone has same size of brain, so why somebody is more intelligent, why somebody is less intelligent, which is mentioned, which is the same thing, like somebody is born in a poor country, at the same time somebody is born in a rich country. It's a function of karma. But yoga is something, takes you from basic, like Patanjali makes it so simple. Wherever you are, start from there. Don't lie to yourself. Now again the word self comes in. Yourself. Now if you don't understand the self, how will we become control? Because the mind and intelligence are like Krishna says, bhumi rapanalo vayu khamanu buddhi revacha, means ether, mind, intelligence are separate. They are
Yeah,
imposed on us by the guna and prakriti. But people don't know
yeah,
guna. They know nothing is taught about prakriti. Nothing is taught.
right,
So how will you understand self now? You can't
right,
differentiate. So when you're talking about self, you're talking about our egos, my likes and dislikes, my
right.
preferences, my world, my this thing. My,
Yeah,
how
and
can
it
you,
very quickly becomes very egocentric.
very egocentric.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. It's a greater conversation. It's like how do we explain to somebody that you are not the mind? In yogic teachings, it's a pretty basic concept, but to those of us in the West that have grown up in just, like living a normal life and not really digging into yoga philosophy at all, it's like, what do you mean I'm not my mind or I'm not my thoughts? It's like that's all I am. That's, if you've taken a Western philosophy course, it's like, or, just like, day to day reading, day to day thinking, it's like all my thoughts, my mind, that makes up me. What else could I possibly be? And yet, in yogic philosophy, Vedic philosophy, there's something beyond the mind. Whether you call it, zoom out and call it like an observer, the self, the Atman, whatever you want to think of it as. Uh, but that's a whole conversation in and of itself for people that aren't familiar with that idea already. So yeah, where do we start? What is the self?
I think the start is what you do is Ashtanga yoga, Hatha yoga system, because at least people start becoming conscious of their bodies first,
Yes.
and then they
Yes.
start gradually moving forward, and then at a much later stage, like you also had a evolution. You started with the
Hmm.
physical exercises, and gradually now you're into the seeker mode.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, especially for Western bodies and Western minds, that is a really great way to start to access yoga is through asana, through the physical practice, through the breath work, stuff like that. Um, because just like you just said it, it centers the body and the mind. It allows us to start to notice ourselves in the present moment. How do I feel right now? We start to be able to connect a little deeper. And I mean, really, that's the goal of all asana, all the jumping around and all the physical yoga postures that are out there in the world. The entire point of it is so that we can eventually just be still and start to notice ourselves. But that's a huge step. It takes a long time.
I have seen some of the one of the best yogis in the Western world, and it's because yoga is for everyone, not just for one area of the world. Is for everybody. Every human being must do yoga, and I think it should become a prerequisite before you become a scientist. Otherwise, you'll just build nuclear bombs, nothing else.
Interesting anecdote, little side story. I years and years ago when I was in grade school, we were doing a report and I had to read about Oppenheimer, who helped develop the first atomic bomb. And he said something that it was a quote that has always stuck with me ever since. He said, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," like right after they detonated the first atomic weapon. And it wasn't until years and years later that I was reading through the Bhagavad Gita for the first time that I was like, I know that, I recognize that. And I had to go back and flip around and do some research. But Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, it was a mistranslation. He says, "I am become time, the destroyer of worlds." But it always stuck with me, and I never knew quite why. And I've actually got it tattooed on my arm now. um, but it was one of the first like exposures to yoga philosophy in my life. But it was Oppenheimer, who was developing the atomic bomb, was actually teaching himself Sanskrit and read the entire Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit while they were working on the Manhattan Project because he didn't have anything else to do. But, researching that further, for the entire remainder of his life, he sort of regretted and was trying to make amends for what he had done in helping to create that thing. Because I think anybody that has the presence to read the Gita when you're doing great work like that, like that, the weight of that is going to stick with you for sure.
I mean, he is a scientist and he was given a contract, German scientist given a contract. A lot of history to that as well, why he was made to do what he was supposed to do. Uh,
Hmm.
but but the the funny was this was named as Manhattan Project, which is a suburb of New York.
Right, right.
I mean, suburb that time. Now it's part of the main. So the one last point, because we have so many things to talk. There's no end to this discussion. Now, generally yogis in US we have such a wonderful yogis. Many sincere seekers are there. The yogi is a seeker and a scientist. Scientist is always a seeker. Scientist never says, "Okay, I've done it." He has something else to prove, something else to move on. That's what the yoga is all about: step by step, step by step, step by step. The one thing which really controls, and I'm talking about the negative propaganda against yoga, to dissuade others from doing yoga. There's a whole systemic thing going on. People are going through their personal interest, because once you experience yoga, you can't go away from it. You just want to stay, and you want to stay with the yogis around you, because you all have like-minded, because the discussions which the yogis have is much at a much deeper level, whether it's a beginner yogi or advanced yogi. And Krishna is called Yogeshwar. He's the god of yogis, or Ishwar of yogis. So is it's very common. Only one person is called Yogeshwar, that is Krishna. Nobody else is called Yogeshwar in Vedas. So he's referred to as Yogeshwar, and everyone else is called Adi Yogi or any other yogi, but Yogeshwar is only one. So people have made up many misconceptions. First of all, the word religion is something. I have very simple definition of religion is someone tells you what to do. Nobody in yoga world, nobody tells you what to do. There is a path people show, but you have to experience yourself. Everyone has to fly their own plane at some point of the time. You know, so it's just a permission to practice your own path, and that's why Patanjali starts from where you are, who you are. Don't have to become someone else. Like you also say in many of your classes, don't look at others. Just follow your practice. There's no need to. There's no. You have to focus on yourself. Now, the misconception comes in. That's how we chose the topic. Is that people, when they say it's a mysticism, or another attack, they do shamanism, or all these kind of things, they connect to yoga nowadays for various purposes, because they want to tell you what to do. But yoga makes a person truly independent. It just opens up. It's like now you're on your own. You are in your own world now. It's your world. You the way Atmate Manete Jagat. You see the world from your mind and your senses and vritti. So sometimes you may not see as it is, because and somebody who's more advanced can see as it is. So this entire mispropaganda moves people away from yoga. Oh, it's not my culture. It's not my
Mhm.
thing. It's not my part of my belief system. But yoga is not about belief. It's a science. It's not about your culture, because anybody can adopt yoga. You can be living in a Saudi Arabia, legalized yoga now. Now it's not part of their culture, and they may hate other yogis as much as they want, but they have made it legal in their country because they know how much benefit it comes. American Medical Association supports yoga as a therapy now. It's getting there in a science. Some people may say it's not still not part of religion. You don't believe in what I, but it's way beyond belief, way beyond culture, way beyond anything else. It strengthens whatever wherever it is practiced. So if you practice yoga, your belief will become stronger. So what do you
Mhm.
want to say on that?
I think that back to the idea of control, people, and back to the idea of fear. Like people fear things that they don't understand, and I think might threaten their power, their control over other people. And also, they fear things that are just different, that are not familiar to them, that are coming from another country, another place. And yoga, the roots of yoga have all of those markers for like people in the West, or you just mentioned Saudi Arabia. Like uh yoga has its roots in India, and on some level it's connected to uh these philosophies, the Vedic philosophies that grew into Hinduism as well as Buddhism as well as Jainism. Like there's so many connections out there. But so many people don't understand that it's separate from all of that, that it's a system unto itself. And like you mentioned earlier, it's a science. It's really a science of understanding the self. So it's scary to people. They think it's something other than what they is part of their circle, their culture, and so they fear it and they push it away, or they illegalize it even in some places. And there's another aspect of control that you touched on, and I don't know if you meant to, but you know, yoga. I think the author Georg Fierstein refers to yoga as a system of radical liberation. We start to go down the path of yoga and we start to understand ourselves. We start to free ourselves from all this bondage of like feelings and emotions and stuff in our lives that are just holding us down, and it feels amazing. And we start to think for ourselves, and that can be dangerous to people that want control. And so, I'm not saying any particular group or anyone is doing this, but just as a concept, just as an idea, if somebody wants control of a population, then they take away their education, they take away their ability to think for themselves, which is exactly what yoga gives you. So, people trying to prevent their constituents or their following from practicing yoga, that may be a reason as well.
You know, good point. Good point. Very good point. And I think we discussed who is in control, who is not in control, what is to be controlled, what is not to be controlled, and also the mysticism, what is we discussed. And I think since if we start viewing yoga as a science, then we will not see it the way we try to put it there. The science has is based on experiments and experience, observation. And yoga is a seeker's world. It's not a dogmatic world where you will be forced to believe. And that's, I think, one of the things people get scared is when a person becomes a yogi, he becomes a free thinker. People, nobody likes free thinkers. And today the social media is the way it is. People are guided. Google guides your search. Facebook controls your what you write over there, and
Yeah, our
Twitter
entire lives are controlled by algorithms. Yeah.
algorithms. And so they really call it machine level programming, MLP. So, and natural
Hmm.
language processing. So they're using everything that they can to guide you. So people are not used to the free thinker. So free thinkers are usually the people who will be most socially isolated guy, quietly sitting, quiet, observing everyone else,
Yeah.
And people who practice yoga, they can actually experience it, that they become socially, sometimes they are socially not accepted well because they are because they are the free thinkers, and they can see things as they are. I mean, even a basic person who is starting on a yoga practice, they they have to, once they get into the few yoga classes, they can observe that they have a different taste now. Taste change, the life's orientation changes. Simple things look completely meaningful after some time. Simple things like observing a moon, it becomes a fascinating exercise just observing a moon. I've seen so many yogis go for cliffs to watch the moon rise. In San Diego, it's like filled up with people going to the Coles Mountain to catch the glimpse of moonrise, full moon nights,
Nice.
full moon kirtans. It's all this. So yes, it does make a difference, and it is definitely not mysticism. It's science. It's definitely not controlling others, controlling yourself first. And a yogi naturally makes the best citizen of any society. Otherwise, why will Saudi Arabia, of all the places on the planet Earth, who used to hate India like anything because of whatever belief dogmatic system they had, now they are adopting it, in making Ramayana and Mahabharata, introducing in their school curriculums now. That Saudi Arabia is doing. And
Very interesting.
Indonesia is introducing Ramayana and Mahabharata because they know the value.
Yeah.
And so, so thank you, Zeb. If you have anything to add, you can add. You want to add something? And close it.
No, I think maybe just again, if people are interested in learning more about me and what I do, you can check me out. My studio website is yogafactory.com, and my personal social media is just Zeb Yoga, all one word. I've got retreats and teacher trainings. I travel most of the year, going around teaching workshops. And when I'm not doing that, I'm at my school in Pittsburgh sharing the yoga love.
Thank you so much. That's a real love. Yoga love is a real love because you're connecting people to the soul. And English word love, again, etymology. I'm a big etymology guy. So you can check out the meaning of love. And there is Sanskrit word to it is prem. Just check out the meanings, difference in meanings. So you'll find out a lot more. So thank you so much, Zeb. And thank you all the viewers for watching. And do subscribe. Let us know your feedback and share the yoga love.
Thank you so
Namaste.
much.
Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.